Hi gang, Rob here. It is late in the evening of 24 June 2013, and tonight we've got a knife review. And this particular review is one that I'm very excited about. Every once in a while you sort of stumble across a knife that surprises you. This would be such a knife. Rare in that it is a folding knife that comes with a factory sheath, suitable for mounting to load-bearing equipment, or LBE. And what is it? It is the outstanding, and yes, with some tone of surprise, I say outstanding, Benchmade 275 Adamas folder. Benchmade produces the Adamas in two forms, one folding, one fixed. Tonight we're going to talk about the folder. Why am I surprised that this knife will be classed on the Apostle P channel as outstanding? Well, because frankly, when I read the specs, watched forum posts, watched people review it on YouTube, it wasn't that impressive. Initially, I kind of expected to regard this knife as a gimmicky, overbuilt, way too heavy, clunky, quote-unquote hard-use folder that had no practical real-world use. Well, I was wrong. Oh, was I wrong. This knife, designed for Benchmade by Shane Siebert with his maker's mark, rather tastefully applied to the blade. Well, let's get into it. You know what? Let's put the blade down and talk about the sheath for a minute. It is constructed of ballistic nylon. Kind of goofy looking, don't you think? What's up with this closure? I thought, man, that's the goofiest thing I've ever seen. Flips backwards, velcros over on itself, has a snap attachment. What the heck? It's just weird, isn't it? Well, function more important than form on this knife. I even thought, man, look at that molly clip. It's like yanking, pulling on the two molly attachment points. Well, it wasn't made to look pretty. Even when you put the knife in it and close it, boy, it just takes a lot of tension to close, and it holds the knife at kind of a wacky angle. I thought, man, that's the ugliest sheath I've ever seen. Well, then I mounted it on the molly attachment of my Maxpedition Fat Boy VersaPack. Well, yeah, that molly clip needs to be that tight to hold the sheath as tightly to the mounting surface as possible, and it holds it extremely tightly. Imagine, if you will, this side of the sheath sucked up tight against something. You're not going to accidentally open the sheath and have the knife fall out. What you do is you grab this loop, give a yank, and access to the knife. If for some reason you wanted to carry it open, like waiting to be resheathed, the flap velcros nicely. Knife goes in. Very well designed and aesthetically ugly sheath. If you were a soldier, and this knife is designed to be carried by soldiers, you'd probably like this sheath quite a bit. And even for civilian use, if you find this 7.7 ounce knife a little heavy to clip to a pocket, but you'd still like to take it with you, it works pretty well on an EDC pack, such as the Maxpedition Fat Boy VersaPack. Well, after I analyzed that sheath with this knife, I sort of developed an appreciation for the sheath. And then I got to the knife. And by the way, this knife on loan from, or actually in the house for sharpening and a spot treatment from the Outdoorinitiative channel. Just spent a few days on an excursion, an adventure, did a little bit of hard work in the woods with the Outdoorinitiative. Came to me after a hard workout for some sharpening. Well, let's get into it, guys. It's not a cartoon knife. It's not an unnecessarily overbuilt knife. It's not even too heavy to carry. It actually works really well. What do we got? We have a blade of D2 tool steel, high carbon, semi-stainless, 160 thousandths in thickness, a thickness it carries down for almost half the breadth of the blade. It is coated in Benchmade's BK1 coating. Sorry guys, in my sharpening video for the Outdoorinitiative's knives, I referred to this as DLC coating or diamond like carbon. It is not. It is Benchmade's proprietary BK1 coating, pretty much sort of an epoxy powder coating. Doesn't wear like DLC. Doesn't chemically bond to the steel like DLC. It will come off, and it usually wears off instead of scratching and flaking like cold steel's Teflon. It's a better coating than that, not as good as DLC. But adequate for our purposes, which is protecting a semi-stainless steel from corrosion in harsh environments. Doesn't have to look pretty. It maintains its protective qualities for a long time. Blade length is 3.82 inches. Handle length 4.88 inches. Overall length 8.70. Width, thickness of the handle 3/4 of an inch. She is beefy, boys. Well, you know what? Even with skeletonized liners and skeletonized scales, we know it ain't no lightweight. 7.7 ounces of Benchmade steel in G10. Well, clearly, that's way too heavy for a folding knife, isn't it? Well, let's throw in with weight some other characteristics like balance and feel. Let's look at the balance. Where does it balance? Right in the center of the finger choil. We would call that ideal, wouldn't we? Makes the knife actually very light in hand. I mean very light in hand. Kind of heavy to carry, but when wielding, very light in hand. The holes in the handle provide indexing points for changing grips. Let's talk about this handle a minute. Fairly thick, like 1/16 of an inch thick, Parkerized stainless steel liners with G10 scales. Super well done, by the way. Now these are not like a peel plier heavily textured G10. They're nicely sanded and contoured and then sandblasted to reveal the layers. The only grip in the G10 provided by the machined holes and the machined slots. This knife doesn't need the G10 to be grippy, however. Unlike almost every Benchmade knife ever made, this one has functional jimping in the liners, in the G10 scales, for a short run up the thumb ramp, in the finger choil, on the underside of the butt, in the butt end of the handle, and in the butt end of the spine. The jimping is functional in every single grip. Once again, function rules the day with this knife. Now, guys, look at this handle. Extremely skeletonized. Although the liners are heavy, the G10's a pretty lightweight material. But it's a beefy handle, 3/4 of an inch thick. And if it balances in the choil, with all that beef in the handle, what does that tell you about the blade? Yeah, that blade is heavy. It's heavy, but look how easily it flies out. No wrist motion. Just a well-placed thumb on a really well-designed but smooth stud. Bury your fingertip right in the top of that stud, create a little tension, and whack! Yeah. For a heavyweight, this thing handles like a Ferrari. I'm not kidding you guys. Spend a couple days with it and you will love it. Doesn't even hog the pocket. Yeah, it's a little thick, but you know, it's not unnecessarily rough or grippy anywhere. Your hand just sort of slides down next to it, gets out whatever you need from the bottom of your pocket, and no big deal. How about the pocket clip? I'm going to get the negative out of the way right away. The pocket clip's a little interesting. It's mounted kind of low on the handle for a deep carry clip. It carries nicely, just about that much of the knife showing. Makes it really easy to extract because when you go into the pocket, look where your thumb is. It just fits nicely into that second hole and out she comes. Pretty cool. But I find the clip a little bit light. Not quite enough tension for this much beef of a knife. Although if you're wearing, thicker khakis or, heavy blue jeans like Carhartts or, a heavy built military pant, I don't think you're going to have to worry about the knife coming out. And I did look at a standard Benchmade clip. I don't know if you guys know this, but when you see these 2-hole deep carry Benchmade clips, the 2-hole pattern does fit the 2 outside holes of a 3-hole clip, standard Benchmade clip. However, the Benchmade standard clip would be enough longer that where the contact point for the clip is, it sort of puts it down here in this groove, and it just wouldn't fit well. So this clip is really the only one that'll work for this knife in Benchmade's selection of clips, which is okay. I'm not saying it's dangerously loose, it's just not quite as tight as a normal Benchmade clip. Minor negative. Just a minor negative. I want to talk about profile, edge grind, and steel choice for a few minutes, and this may take a bit. You're going to have to maybe grab a cup of coffee, guys, and settle in, because this is not going to be a short review. So what we've got is a blade profile, a blade contour that is a little odd for a Benchmade. Most Benchmade knives that I've seen are kind of thin for their task. Most of them are ground fairly thin to the edge. But we've got, 5 30-seconds thick stock that doesn't start to taper until almost halfway down, and then we've got a real steep run to the edge. Why? Because this is a hard use knife, guys. This is not not a knife made to cut paper-thin slices of tomato. It is not a knife made to wow you with how well it cuts tissue paper. It's a knife designed to go deployed with a soldier into a harsh environment and be used for every cutting task he has. Will it cut? I don't know. You think it'll cut? I mean, obviously, you look at it, you know it's meant for hard use. Some of you are already going, wait a minute, it's made of D2. That stuff cracks, it chips out. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. But obviously, just by its contour and profile, hard use, right? Let's see if it slices. Let's see if it can handle some phone book paper. What? How can this be? How can this be? Wait a minute. This isn't, it's not a Rockstead. Really? Well, yeah. Which leads me into a little short discussion about the steel choice. Why D2? I think it's the perfect choice for this knife. D2 is an air hardening tool steel. High carbon, fairly high chromium content, a near stainless steel, about 11.5–12% of chromium, I think. Some of the corrosion protective qualities of that chromium get eaten up in its carbide formation. But what was D2 originally designed for? Well, for industrial dies, specifically shearing dies. I'm going to put the knife down for a minute. A shear basically has two pieces of a tool. Material is fed across the bottom die. When it comes through to a specified length, the top die shears it off. Shears it off. It needs to be a precision cut. That softer metal coming through needs to be precisely cut by those two large pieces of steel coming together. Now, that doesn't look like a knife. Those things are cut on almost 90-degree edge angles. Although they're not thin slicing tools, they are precision cutting tools. They require a fine and precise edge. The steel that they're made of doesn't need to be springy or tough, but it does have a requirement for an extremely fine and precise sharp edge. See, the support of the material itself is going to give it stability. It doesn't need to spring and recover. It's supported. Large blocks of sharp steel rubbing against each other, shearing off softer metal. Got to be wear resistant, got to be precise. We're not real concerned about chipping. So if we're going to use D2 for a knife blade, it needs to be blocky, especially if we're going to use it for hard use cutting, similar types of shearing. We're not going to rely on the elasticity, the springiness, the toughness of the steel to keep it from breaking. We're going to rely on mass and support of the material around it. We have mass and we have support here. We're not going to talk about Benchmade's edge grind. If you want to know how I felt about Benchmade's edge grind on this knife, watch last night's video. From the sharpening bench, Benchmade ramblings, I think I call it. This blade, as sharpened by me, has a 36 degree or 18 degrees per side secondary bevel or approach grind with a 23 per side or 46 inclusive micro bevel. A little steeper, a little more obtuse than I usually apply because of the application of this knife. Can you chop with it? Heck yes, you can chop with it. Can you delimb trees for shelter making? Yes, you can. The only time you're going to run into trouble with D2 is if it hits something harder than it is. For instance, you're chopping something on the ground and you hit a rock. that rock harder than the steel, if it is restrained and can't be moved by the mass of the blade, you're going to have a chip. If the rock can move, the D2 is probably going to just move it out of the way and go on with life. What about like batoning? If you baton this knife through a piece of wood and you hit a knot that wants to bend this blade, if the knot is stronger than the knife blade's going to break. It's not, you're not going to bend this thing, 20 or 30 degrees, sticking it through a knot and have it spring back. It's not 1095. It's not 5160. It's D2. It's not designed to be bent and spring back. But that's not really the purpose of this knife, is it? It can be a very good slicer. It'll maintain an edge for a very long time. It's got enough mass to chop, to cleave things that are either softer than it is or able to be moved. Remember, guys, wear resistance. This steel is designed for two big blocks of it to be rubbing against each other and shearing off softer metal time after time after time without needing to go back to the tool room and get reground. It takes a super, super keen edge and holds on to it for a long time. I mean, look at the polish on this thing. And it does it easily. I mean, it's really amazing stuff. All right, that's enough my love affair with D2 for now. How about the mechanism? It is Benchmade's, well, famous or infamous axis lock, and it is the beefiest version of the axis lock Benchmade has ever made. The axis lock bar is a larger diameter than any other. Stop pin larger than any other. Liners thicker than any other. Pivot is very large and has very fine threads, and the pivot screw goes almost all the way through to the head of the cup. Very long, very finely threaded and large diameter pivot screw. The outside dimensions of the pivot, almost 3/8 of an inch. It's beefy and it is solid. The Omega springs, well, they are the Omega springs. They are the weak link in the design. And for those of you who doubt the ability of the axis lock in a survival situation or a quote-unquote trust your life with it knife, yes, an Omega spring could break. And yes, you're going to have a hard time getting Benchmade to send you a set as backups. They just won't do it. You have to send your knife to them. You might be able to beg a set of extra springs out of them if you send your knife in. Might they break? Have they broken? Yes and yes. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's say both my Omega springs break in the field. I'm a soldier using this knife in a deployment. Is my knife now out of commission? No. If I broke the lock bar on my titanium frame lock, my knife is done. There's no way I can really hold that knife open and use it. Let's say both my Omega springs break. Well, my lock bar will still go forward onto the tang, thus locking my blade. I could grab a stick or a twig. I could jam it through the slot, break it off. I got a fixed blade. Omega springs breaking do not disable this knife, do not make it any less capable of saving my life. If you've got more than one knife and you're a normal person, a broken Omega spring means 2 weeks gone to Benchmade to get them replaced for free. If you are a deployed soldier, put a stick in it and break it off. Use your knife. How about lockup? Well, if there's one thing I hate when describing a folding knife, it's when somebody describes a locking mechanism, specifically a manufacturer, by calling it virtually a fixed blade. because no folding knife is a fixed blade. But guys, I've held hundreds of knives in my hand. I've analyzed them, tested them, evaluated them. I have grabbed a hold of the ends of knife blades and tried to develop blade play or flex in all those knives. Even more than my Gale Bradley folder. This is absolutely the most rigid folding knife I've ever held in my hand. Bar none. There is, with all the force I can apply, no play, no flex in any direction. It's amazing. I don't know if you can see the size of the washers in this knife. Let's see if I can. They're huge. I mean, they're like almost 3/4 of an inch in diameter. The lateral support is amazing. Oh yeah. Still pretty smooth, don't you think? Guys, this is not a this knife is not a marketing stunt. It's not a, oh yeah, we can build a hard use folder too knife. This is the real deal. You know, I'm not saying that every knife nut wants one of these to carry every day. But if I were a soldier, you bet I'd want one. And if I'm a collector and I want a hard use folding knife to round out my arsenal, this is the knife I want. What do you think about that gorgeous drop point with the swedge at the end? Isn't that gorgeous? Nice little fuller, and no purpose for that other than looking cool. Although having said that, every single machining operation, every cut, every hole on this knife contributes to this. Perfect balance again. You know, could they have made this knife better? Yeah, they could use a little higher quality coating. They could grind their edge from the factory a lot better than they do. But let's face it, you know, other than an extremely expensive knife that's ground perfectly with purpose from the factory, every production knife I own is going to get my edge and my profile. So I guess I really don't care how it comes from the factory. Although, when you're paying $150 for a knife, you'd like the edge to be serviceable. This one probably isn't. Doesn't matter now though, does it? You know, this is not a knife I wanted to love. It's a knife I kind of wanted to be able to snicker at. Well, there ain't no snickering, boys. This thing's for real. I said when I reviewed the Benchmade 710 that Benchmade hadn't come out with anything better. Now this might be for what it does. Go get you one. Black or tan, that's the question. Grace and peace, guys. Have a good night.